"Marry me," she said it at 2 in the morning, sitting on my tailgate in the diner lot, still in her work clothes, holding a coffee she wasn't drinking. I laughed. "Sure. Right after I win the lottery." "I'm serious, Rhett. 90 days. On paper. Then we're done. But I need a husband by Friday, or I lose everything. And you're the only man alive I trust." She wiped her eyes, furious about the tears. "Please, don't make me beg. 12 years she'd been my best friend. 12 years I'd loved her and never said a word. And now she wanted to marry me. For 90 days, with no idea what she was really asking. If you love a story where an ordinary working man finally gets his shot, hit subscribe and tell me where you're listening from tonight. Now, get in the truck. This is a long one. My name's Rhett Callahan. I'm 34 years old and I'm an electrician. 3rd generation. My granddad wired half the houses in this town before I was born, and my dad after him, and now me. I run my own little one-man operation out of a van with my name on the side. I fix what's broken. I don't overcharge widows, and I know the inside of every old house in this county, down to the knob and tube. It's not a job that impresses anybody, but I've never once had to wonder if the work mattered. You flip a switch, the light comes on. A man could do worse. Casey does hair, has since beauty school. She rents a chair at a salon downtown, and she's the best in the county, and old ladies book her 3 weeks out just to sit in her chair and be told they look 10 years younger. She's loud and she's funny, and she cries at dog commercials, and she'd give you the coat off her back in a blizzard. She's been my best friend since we were 15 years old. I'll tell you the exact night I knew, because I've never told anybody. We were 17. Her boyfriend at the time, some baseball player, forgettable, stood her up for the winter dance, and I found her sitting on the tailgate of my daddy's truck in the school parking lot in a green dress, freezing, trying not to cry. And I didn't have anything smart to say, so I just took off my jacket and put it around her shoulders and sat down next to her. And we watched everybody else's headlights leave one by one, and she leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "You're the only boy who's never once let me down, Rhett Callahan." And I sat there in the cold with my whole chest on fire, thinking, say something now, and I didn't. I drove her home, and I said goodnight, and I let the moment go, because I was 17 and terrified, and I told myself there'd be a better time. There is never a better time. That's the whole trap. You think there'll be a better time for 17 straight years. In that truck, at 2 in the morning, Casey told me why she needed a husband by Friday. Casey was raised by her grandmother. Her mom took off when she was little. Her dad was never in the picture, and it was Gran, Ruth Ann Booker, who raised her in a farmhouse out on Hollis Road that had been in the family 4 generations. Casey grew up in that house, learned to walk in that kitchen, buried her grandfather out behind it under the oak. Gran passed 8 months ago. And that's when Casey found out about the will. "My Uncle Dale," she said, staring out the windshield. "Gran's son. He's been gone 30 years. Moved to the city, barely called. Showed up to the funeral in a suit that cost more than my car, and left before the casseroles. And it turns out Gran, God love her, was old-fashioned. The will splits the farm. Half to me, half to Dale. But there's a clause." Her jaw tightened. Gran didn't trust me to hold on to the place as a single woman. Her words, in the will. She left me my half free and clear, only if I'm settled and married, within a year of her passing. Otherwise my half reverts to Dale. All of it, the house, the land, the oak tree, everything. That's insane. You can't put that in a... Lawyer says you can. It's her property. She can leave it how she wants. Casey's voice cracked. And Dale's got a developer already sniffing around. Wants to buy the whole thing and put up 40 houses. He's just waiting for the year to run out, so my half falls to him. And the year runs out. She closed her eyes. In 91 days. If I'm not married by then, I lose the only home I've ever had, and they bulldoze my grandmother's kitchen for a cul-de-sac. The truck was quiet. Rain started up on the roof, soft. So marry somebody, I said, and it cost me something to say it. You've dated half this county. Marry one of them for real. I don't love any of them, Rhett, and I'm not going to trap some poor guy in a real marriage to save a farmhouse. That's a lie that ruins a life. She turned to me. But you're my best friend. We already know it's not real. 90 days, we file the paper. I keep Gran's house. We divorce quiet. And nobody gets hurt, because nobody's pretending to feel something they don't. She grabbed my hand. You're the only person I can do this with, and not lose. Please, Rhett, please. And there it was. Nobody's pretending to feel something they don't. She had no idea. 12 years, and she had no idea. Okay, I heard myself say. Because what was I gonna do? Watch her lose her grandmother's house? Watch a developer bulldoze the kitchen where I'd eaten 100 Sunday dinners? Let her marry some other man to save it? Okay, I said again. 90 days. But we do it right. Or Dale'll smell it. You said the will says settled and married. Settled means living together. Means it looks real. You move into my place, or I move into the farmhouse, and we sell it. Top to bottom. To everybody. Dale. The lawyer. The whole town. Because your uncle is going to be looking for a fake, and I am not about to hand him one. Casey stared at me. You've thought about this more than I have, and I've had 8 months. I think about wiring diagrams for a living, I said. It's the same thing. You find every way the current could go wrong before you close the box. She laughed, wet and surprised, and threw her arms around my neck in the front seat of my truck, and I held my best friend while she cried out 8 months of fear, and I stared over her shoulder at the rain and thought, Rhett Callahan, you absolute fool. You just agreed to marry the woman you love and pretend you don't for 90 days. This is going to be the best and worst 3 months of your life. I had that exactly right. I just had the ending wrong. We got married that Friday at the courthouse. Casey wore a yellow dress. I wore my good shirt, the one without my name stitched on it. Her cousin Bree stood up as witness, and the judge said the words, and I put a ring on Casey Booker's finger, and she put one on mine, and when the judge said the part about kissing the bride, we both froze, because we hadn't planned for that, and then Casey grabbed my face and kissed me quick and light and laughed it off. For the paperwork. And I smiled and laughed too, and felt the floor drop out of my whole life, because it did not feel like paperwork to me, not even a little. I moved into the farmhouse that weekend, and here's where it started changing. Slow, the way the biggest things always do. Because it turns out living with your best friend is different than being your best friend. All those years, we'd hang out and then go home to our separate lives. Now, there was no going home. Now I woke up to Casey Booker making coffee in her grandmother's kitchen in an old t-shirt with her hair a mess, humming to the radio. Now I fell asleep to the sound of her moving around the house that had raised her. Now it was my truck and her car in the same driveway, and my boots by her door, and 2 toothbrushes in the same cup, and every single ordinary thing I'd spent 12 years never letting myself imagine. The house needed work. Old houses always do. And I'm an electrician whose granddad wired the county, so I did what I do. I rewired the whole place, evenings and weekends. No charge, because Gran's knob and tube was a fire waiting to happen, and because I couldn't sit still in that house without fixing something. And every fixture I replaced, every switch I set right, Casey would come lean in the doorway and watch me work. And one night she said, "Quiet. You know Gran always said you'd make somebody a good husband. She said it for years. That Callahan boy. Steady hands, steady heart. Casey wrapped her arms around herself. She'd think this was hilarious. Us, married in her kitchen to save her house. She'd think it was about time, I said, before I could stop myself. Casey went still. What's that mean? Nothing, I said, and turned back to the box. Hand me the wire strippers. But it didn't stay nothing, because living in that house was slowly wearing the nothing right off me. There was a night maybe 3 weeks in. A storm knocked the power out, the whole road went dark, and I went down to the old fuse panel with a flashlight in my teeth to get us back on, and Casey came down after me, holding 2 candles because she said she wasn't going to sit up there alone in the dark of her dead grandmother's house. So we ended up sitting on the kitchen floor with the candles between us, waiting out the storm, and she started telling me about growing up there, about Gran teaching her to make biscuits at that counter, about her grandfather calling her Little Bit, about being the girl whose mama left and how Gran never once let her feel like a leftover. You know what's funny, she said, watching the candle. This is the first time since Gran died that this house has felt like a home instead of a museum, because there's somebody else breathing in it. She looked up at me. Because it's you. And the candlelight was doing something to her face, and the rain was coming down on Gran's roof, and I had never in my life wanted so badly to reach across a kitchen floor, and I had never been so scared to. Case, I said. Yeah? The power came back on. The whole kitchen flooded with light, and the moment snapped like a cut wire, and we both laughed, too quick, and got up off the floor, and I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling and thought, 90 days is not going to be long enough, and it's also going to be way, way too long. I almost told her that night too. I didn't, because we had a plan, and the plan did not have room for a man ruining everything by wanting more than the paper. Here's the first twist I didn't see coming, and it's the one that started tightening the screws on everybody. Uncle Dale didn't buy it. He showed up at the farmhouse 2 weeks in, unannounced, that developer's card practically burning a hole in his pocket, and he walked through the place with his eyes narrow, looking for the fake. And he found me on a ladder fixing a light, and Casey handing me tools, and my name on the mailbox. And he still didn't believe it, because Dale is not a stupid man, he's just a greedy one. Convenient, Dale said, in the kitchen, not bothering to lower his voice. Mama's not cold a year, and suddenly the hairdresser marries her handyman. You think a judge is going to look at this and not see exactly what it is? He smiled at me, ugly. You know what she's using you for, son? A signature. 90 days and she'll drop you like a bad habit and keep the house. She tell you that part? And here's the thing. Every word of it was true. That was the plan. Word for word. But Dale said it to hurt her, to make her feel like a schemer in her own grandmother's kitchen, and I watched Casey's face start to crumple, and something in me that had been quiet for 12 years stood straight up. Dale, I said, and I came down off the ladder slow, wiping my hands. Let me tell you what you're looking at. You're looking at a man who's been in love with your niece since the 10th grade and never had the guts to say so. You're looking at a man who'd have married her for real years ago if he'd thought for 1 second she'd have him. So you can call this a scheme all you want. But you're standing in a house I'm rewiring with my own 2 hands for a woman I would do anything for. And if you think a judge won't see that, you go right ahead and take us to court, Dale. Please. I'll testify all day about how I feel about her. It'll be the truest thing anybody ever said in that courtroom. The kitchen went dead silent. I did not mean to say it. 12 years of not saying it, and it just came out, because Dale was hurting her, and I'd have said anything to make him stop. I couldn't even look at Casey. I stared at Dale, who stared at me, and then Dale's face twisted, and he grabbed his coat and said, "We'll see," and left, and his car spat gravel down the driveway. And then it was just me and Casey in Gran's kitchen, and I finally made myself look at her, and she was staring at me like she'd never seen me before in her life. Rhett, she whispered. What did you just say? Dale needed to hear it, I said, fast. That's all. He needed to hear something true, so he'd back off. I laid it on thick. It worked, didn't it? He's gone. Casey didn't move. Since the 10th grade? Case. You said the 10th grade. You said years. That's not laying it on thick, Rhett. That's... Her voice broke. That's a lot of specific numbers for a lie. And I stood there in that kitchen, with 12 years of my life hanging in the air, and I had a choice. I could laugh it off. Protect the plan. Protect the friendship. Keep the thing I'd kept so long and so carefully that it had its own room in me by now. Or I could tell the truth, and maybe lose her. I've got a real problem, Casey, I said, quiet, because the plan was 90 days and no feelings, and I already had the feelings when I signed the paper. I've had them since we were 15. I never said anything, because I'd rather have you as my best friend for the rest of my life than lose you by wanting more. I set the wire strippers down, so now you know. And I'll understand if this wrecks everything, and I'll move back to my place tonight, and we'll figure out the house some other way, because I never ever wanted to make you feel like you owed me something for helping. That's the last thing I want. Casey didn't say anything. She just walked out of the kitchen, and I stood there thinking I'd done exactly what I'd spent 12 years not doing. I'd blown up the best thing in my life by wanting it, and I went and got my bag to move out. She stopped me at the door. You don't get to say all that and leave, she said. She was crying again, mad again, and something else. 12 years, Rhett. You let me date every idiot in this county. You held my hand through 2 breakups. You pulled me out of Miller's Creek. And you never said one word? She hit me in the chest. Not hard. Do you have any idea how many times I told myself I couldn't feel what I felt about you, because you obviously just saw me as a friend, and I was not going to be the girl who ruined the best friendship of her life by... I stopped breathing. By wanting more. She finished, and her voice cracked all the way through. You absolute idiot. We've been doing the same thing, for 12 years, in opposite corners. The next part I'm keeping between me and Casey, but I'll tell you the wall of 12 years came down in that doorway, and it came down hard, and when we finally came up for air she was laughing, and I was too, and Gran's house was a lot warmer than it had been that morning. So now here's the second twist, and it's the one that nearly cost us everything anyway. Because now it was real. Really real. The realest thing that ever happened to either of us. And that turned out to be a bigger problem than fake ever was. Dale came back. Not to yell. To make an offer. He'd figured out he couldn't prove the marriage was fake, so he changed the game. He came to Casey with a check. A big one. A life-changing one. More money than a hairdresser and an electrician see in a decade. To just sell him her half. Take the money, he said. Skip the whole marriage clause. Walk away rich and let him have the land. And Casey, this is the part that shows you who she is. Casey said no. Because it was never about money. It was about Gran's kitchen and the oak tree and the only home she'd ever had. But then Dale played his last card. The cruel one. And he played it at me. Privately. Out by my van. You really love her, he said. Then here's how you prove it. That check I offered her? I'll write you one too. Same number. All you gotta do is let the 90 days run out. Don't renew. Don't stay. Just be busy the last week. Pick a fight. Walk away before the deadline. Her half reverts to me. I pay you. She never knows you were involved. And you walk away with more money than you'll make in 15 years wiring houses. He smiled. A working man like you doesn't get offers like this twice. Think about your future, instead of a girl's grandmother's kitchen. And this is the moment the whole thing turned on. Not the wedding, not the confession. This. Because I'd just gotten everything I'd wanted for 12 years. And a man was offering me enough money to change my whole life, to quietly throw it away, and swearing she'd never find out. You want to know what I said to Dale Booker by my van? I'll tell you at the end, because where it lands matters. What I'll tell you now is that the last month of those 90 days was the best month of my life, and I did the thing I should have done 12 years before. I stopped keeping the truth in its own careful room. I told Casey every day. I fixed her grandmother's house down to the last outlet. I asked her, 3 weeks before the deadline, on the porch of the farmhouse under the oak where her grandparents were buried, if she'd stay married to me after the 90 days were up. For real. Forever. No paper, no clause, no plan. I didn't have a ring speech. I'm not a speech man, so I just told her the truth, the way I should have, at 17 in a school parking lot. I've loved you since a winter dance you got stood up for, I said. I put my jacket around you, and I didn't say anything, and I've regretted that particular silence for 17 years. I'm done being quiet, Case. I don't want 90 days. I want the kind of number Gran had. 40 years and an oak tree. I took her hand. Marry me for real. Not to save a house, just because I finally got brave enough to ask. She said yes before I got the whole question out. The deadline came. We took the paperwork to the lawyer. Proof of a real, settled, married household. A rewired house with both our names on the utilities. A marriage that was about as real as a marriage gets. The clause was satisfied. Casey kept Gran's house. The oak tree stayed standing. The developer took his 40 cul-de-sac houses somewhere else. And Dale? Dale showed up at the lawyer's office to make one last stand, to claim it was all a fraud, that I'd been paid, that none of it was real. He stood up in that office and he said, "Ask him. Ask Rhett Callahan what I offered him out by his van. Ask him about the check. He's a broke electrician. You think he said no to that kind of money? It's all a scheme. I can prove he was bought. You offered me $60,000, I said, to run out the clock and let you take her grandmother's house. Cash. And to never tell her I did it." The lawyer's eyebrows went up. Casey went white. "That's right," I said, looking at Dale, but talking to her. "Your uncle offered me more money than I'll see in 15 years to betray you and keep quiet about it. Out by my van 3 weeks ago." I turned to Casey, "And I've been sitting on it, and I hated sitting on it, but I didn't want to hurt you with what your own family would do to you for a piece of land." "What did you say to him?" Casey whispered. "Rhett, what did you say? Here it is. The thing I said to Dale Booker by my van, that I told you I'd save. I told him," I said, "that I spent 12 years too scared to tell your niece I loved her, and I was not about to spend 1 minute being paid to lose her, now that I finally had. I told him he could keep his check and shove it, because there is not enough money on God's green earth to make a man sell the only thing he ever really wanted." I took her hand. "And then I told him to get off my property, which, technically, is your property." But he got the idea. The office was quiet. Dale's own confession, the bribe, said out loud in front of the lawyer, had just blown his whole case to pieces. A man who tries to bribe someone to sabotage a marriage can't very well argue the marriage was the fraud. He'd hung himself with his own rope. He didn't say a word. He picked up his coat and he left, and this time the gravel he spat down that driveway was the last we ever heard from him. Casey and I stood in that lawyer's office, married for real, the house saved, and she looked up at me with those wet, furious, beautiful eyes, and she said the thing I'll hear in my head till the day I die. "You turned down $60,000, she said, "for a hairdresser and a farmhouse." "Best deal I ever made," I said, "and I close every box before I want to know it's wired right." She's had that on a little sign in Gran's kitchen ever since. Steady hands, steady heart. Turns out Gran was right about the Callahan boy all along. So that's the story of how my best friend asked me to marry her for 90 days, and how the smartest thing I ever did was tell the truth I'd been too scared to say for 12 years. If you rode all the way to the end with me, you're my kind of people, and I want to know who you are. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight, because it honestly gets me, thinking about how far these stories travel out into the dark. And tell me straight, how long is too long to keep a thing like that to yourself? 12 years? 20? Is there somebody you've been in the opposite corner from this whole time? No wrong answers, just the truth, if you've got the guts for it. I almost didn't. And if this one warmed you up on a cold night, do me one small favor. Tap that like button so the next person finds it. Hit subscribe and ring the bell, because I've got a brand new story for you every single week, and something tells me you and I are going to get along just fine. Take care of the ones you love out there, and tell them, don't wait 12 years like I did.